Good afternoon. I'm Reverend Will McGarvey, Executive Director of the Interfaith Council of Contra Costa County, and I'm here with my good friend Phillip Scott from Ancestral Voice, Pathways of Indigenous Learning. Did I get that correct?
No, sir. So it's
Please
Ancestral
correct.
Voice Institute for Indigenous Lifeways.
Institute for Indigenous Lifeways. So glad that you're spending some time with me, and we're going to be talking about medicine of interfaith in times of crisis. And you want to give a fuller introduction of you and your spiritual path?
I will be happy to. It's a pleasure to be with you today, Will. And however, before I launch into a little sharing of my own personal history and journey, I'd like to commence with a song and a prayer that's acceptable with you.
Please.
I've already cleansed myself off with sage, cleansed off all my instruments, so I'm going to use this drum here as well.
Oh,
Hey, Tonkashila Wakantanka. Great mystery, great spirit, ancestors in the star nations, those who visit us in our dreams and walk among us. To Grandfather Sun, to Grandmother Moon, in her time of fullness last night. To the thunder beings, the thunder nations who bring the sacred waters from the sky, blessing, purifying, and cleansing our beloved Mother the Earth. To the sacred winds that blow from the four directions, carrying our prayers on behalf of our loved ones and ourselves. To our beloved Mother the Earth, and to all of our relations upon her Shunkawa Kansapa, humbly sings his voice in gratitude for my life today. Another day that I may awaken to learn and to grow and to remember how to be human. I ask for prayers and blessings for my dear friend and colleague here, Will. I ask for prayers and blessings upon himself and his family. Thank you for his ministry. I pray, Creator, for this time in this world. I acknowledge those that are making their journey as a result of being touched by this virus. I pray, Creator, that their journey back to you is without complication. For those, Creator, who are suffering as a result of the loss of their loved ones, I pray that their time is one of gentleness and compassion in their journey of grief. I acknowledge, Creator, those who are placing their lives on the line in service and protection of those who are infirmed, as well as to ensure that the networks remain open and viable in this time to support all people. Please keep everyone safe, Creator. all people protected. Creator, I ask for prayers that leaders may come together in solidarity to support one another in this time, whether it be politically, governmentally, spiritually, that all people may be united in this time to use this medicine that we have to help us remember how to be human, how to care for one another. I also kindly request and pray to this virus for your mercy and your compassion, that the teachings and the learnings toward us can be gentle, to help us remember what we have forgotten, which is how to be responsible, loving stewards of this earth and all of our relations upon her. I pray this day, Creator, that my sharing, my exchange with my brother here may be fruitful and can support all those who will listen to our conversation. I thank you for this way to pray. I acknowledge the spirits of this land, the indigenous inhabitants of this world, who are also equally deeply challenged at this time, having less access to resources vital for their survival and their nation's survival. I thank you for this way to pray. Aho, mitakuye oyatsi.
And prayers especially for the Navajo Nation and the Wampanoag Nation this time.
Aho. Aho. Well, I understand that today is Passover, if I'm not mistaken.
It'll start at sundown tonight.
So what a beautiful opportunity for us to speak about interfaith support and exchange and collaboration and solidarity right now.
Yes.
So a little bit about my story.
Yes, please.
So we call them big medicine dreams, and they started when I was 6 years old, and I was being visited by ancestors in the dream time, and helped me to understand that the dream time is more real than actually this waking world and illusion that we traverse in. And then when I was 7 years old, I had a near-death experience as a result of a sledding accident, where I could see the spirits in ordinary time, not just in my dreams. And then from around 7 to 17, about 10 years, I was being taught and trained in my dreams. Many of the ancestors who visited me were actually Lakota as well as Toltec. And so, of course, they would describe themselves not in English, when they would introduce themselves, right? So, hey Hakasapa, black elk, or Tashunka Witko, crazy horse, is how they would address themselves in the dream time. And of course, much later, when I began to learn a little bit more about Lakota, then I understood that it was these individuals that were visiting me. Anyhow, they would come to me in my dreams and they would teach me things. And then when I was 17, I was introduced to the works of Castaneda, which began to fill in a lot of the blanks within my dream time and the knowledge. So at which point I made a formal commitment when I was 17 to walk the red road, to walk the native path. And I went off to college and I studied neuroscience and animal behavior and philosophy. Also began to study Asian philosophy as well, learning Tai Chi, Buddhism, Tibetan Buddhism, and Taoism. After 5 years of academic immersion and graduating, I felt compelled not to continue my academics, even though it was rich, and I had the chance to actually study wolves and bison and the interactions that they would have as a part of my ethology, animal behavior training. But I was tired of reading about life. I wanted to live it. And so I was introduced to ballet when I was 14. My grandfather was a writer and director of the Fred Astaire Ginger Roger movies. So I was quite inspired by Fred Astaire and his grace and his fluidity. as well as by Baryshnikov. And so when I was 14, I began to study ballet. And while I went to college, I was still involved with dance, albeit, kind of on the side. But then I realized I wanted dance to become my spiritual quest after I graduated. And so I came out to the West Coast, where I was given a full scholarship at a ballet school. And then for 2 years, 6 days a week, 8 hours a day, I was training to become a ballet dancer. And, I continued to dream and do my practices in native medicine. And after 2 years of literal blood, sweat, and tears, the director of the school said that I was ready to pursue a professional career. However, he said that I was far too old to find a job in America at that time. I was in my mid-20s or so. And so he said that I would fare better in Europe, that there was more respect for artists over there. And he was correct. So I traveled over to Europe, and after 26 auditions and rejections, I finally landed a job in a ballet company in Switzerland. And once I settled there, I then I had the time as well as the resources to pursue my other love, which was indigenous medicine. So I found a group of individuals who were practicing indigenous ways in Switzerland. And so every week, faithfully, I would travel to this group. I would actually, from rehearsal, I would get on a train and trams and buses to find this remote location to share ceremony with some people that were practicing these ways. And they would invite actually Scandinavian medicine people called Sami, the Sami people, Sami medicine people. The English word is Laplander people. They'd bring them down to share ceremony with us. And after a couple years, I felt the need, artistically, it felt like a dead end at this particular company. And I wanted to expand my horizons. And one of the instructors, Scandinavian Sami practitioners, encouraged me actually to move up to Norway, to go up to Sami land. And so I auditioned for the Norwegian National Ballet and was accepted. And I was given the name of a person that I needed to seek out, who was Sami, who was from above the Arctic Circle in Norway. And so when I settled into Oslo, I immediately began to search this person out and was not successful at locating him. And so I placed an ad in the newspaper saying that I was seeking a ceremonial circle. And he called me the very same day, as fortune would have it. And equally as fortune would have it, he was doing a lot of work to create charter schools and to protect the language and cultural identity of his people, educational programs and the like. And his office, he was a writer as well, and a traditional healer from his people. His office was 1 block from the theater. So every day after work, after rehearsal, I would travel over to his place and we would share. And we were more like colleagues than he was an actual mentor of mine. But we really enjoyed each other's company and did a lot of healings together. And I did, learn quite a bit in terms of the Scandinavian practices. He also had a community of people, and one of the individuals in his community was an expat American living 40 plus years in Norway, fluent in the Norwegian language, also a remarkable hardanger fiddle player, which is one of their musical instruments. And he was a sun dancer, and he danced with the Ojibwe people in North Dakota. and was granted permission to conduct the purification lodge in Norway from his chief. So my first exposure to the traditional Native American purification lodge was in Norway. And after my first experience, it felt like coming home. And so I spent a lot of time participating in the lodges. He also was granted permission from Sami mentors to conduct the Scandinavian Sauna, which is also a traditional practice, both of which have tremendous merit right now because the intense heat of the lodge as well as the sauna actually help to cause the virus to perish. So about 130 degrees, between 130 and 160, the virus perishes. And of course, within the purification lodge, once the water strikes the superheated stones, you have 212 degrees Fahrenheit with the steam. And so it's a very healing medicine, and that's why we regard the Inipi, as it's called in Lakota, the purification lodge, as the native hospital. Anyhow, he had another mentor who was a Native American from the Ute and Pueblo nations. And when I met this man, the spirits that I had been working with said, "This is your teacher, this is your mentor." And so I began training with him. And whenever I wasn't dancing professionally, I was traveling the world, sharing ceremonies with him and taking copious notes. I was a student of his and was understood the potency of the medicine and the teachings that he was transmitting, and so felt very compelled to learn as much as I could from him. When the course of one of his ceremonies, we were doing a long dance, an all-night ceremony, I received a vision. And in this vision, an eagle came down and sunk its talons into my chest and lifted me off the ground. Well, I didn't know what it meant, so I took this vision to him, and he informed me that it was a Sundance dream. And he was a Sundance chief as well, and so I said, "Oh, well, what a beautiful gift. I'm looking forward to dancing with you." And he said, "Well, you actually cannot dance with me because in my tradition we don't pierce, but this was a piercing dream. So you're going to have to seek out a Sundance where they pierce the flesh." And so I consulted with my friend who had introduced me to the Purification Lodge in Norway, because I said he was also a sun dancer. So he took this request to his chief, who denied my entry because he was closing down the ceremony to outsiders and keeping it only as what's called a family dance. But my friend also had contact with the matriarch of a dance in South Dakota. So I wrote her a letter explaining the vision that I had received, and she took it to the chief, and this chief granted me permission to begin sun dancing. And I've now been, this is my 29th consecutive year sun dancing.
Wow.
Sometimes I do more than 2 dances in a year. Interestingly enough, after Norway, I moved back down to Switzerland. My contract is only for a year up in Norway. And so I went to another company in Switzerland. And I returned to the people that I had shared time with, when I first went to Europe. And they saw the significant change within me and asked if I could teach them. And of course, I didn't feel prepared or compelled to share anything because I felt I was still learning. So I asked my teacher, and of course, when I had spent some time with him, particularly after my first Sundance, he encouraged me and recommended that I begin teaching and sharing what I know. But I was still conflicted. I still wanted to dance professionally. But again, we often, we don't control our lives. And so after my first Sundance, I went to spend time with my native teacher, and he again encouraged me to teach. But I still felt, some resistance, and I really felt compelled that I wanted to continue to dance professionally in ballet. And so after visiting with my mentor, I went to my brother's wedding. He was getting married that year. And he asked me to choreograph a piece for his wedding ceremony because I'd been doing some choreography in the company in Norway. And in the course of this of the ceremony, we were outside on some cobblestone. As I did an aerial maneuver, I landed on the outside of my ankle. And even though I made my mistake look good on my stumble, I tore all the ligaments in my foot. And that was the end of my professional ballet career. So it was very clear that the spirits wanted me to go in a different trajectory, a different direction. And so I have been sundancing ever since, and was granted permission from my mentors to continue to share and teach. After my third dance, I was given instructions to create the center, Ancestral Voice, which has now been in existence for quite a while, over 25 years now. And so that's kind of the story, kind of what I call a Reader's Digest synopsis of my life. As a part of my teachings in the medicine, it's important for us to come together in solidarity. And so I had exposure to other religions growing up. As I said, actually, in my youth, my family was Christian, and so I had exposure to the teachings of Christ and reading the Bible. And then, of course, my time in college involved not only my personal explorations of indigenous medicine in my readings, but also doing Asian medicine and martial arts. And then, of course, my devotion to the native path now. I did learn later from my father, actually, was when he was on his deathbed, he shared that we did have indigenous ancestry, but that was never discussed growing up. So it's interesting that within my blood memory, I was following the directions and dreams and the guidance that way. But I really feel that it's important for us to see that it is universal, our desire to have communion with the source and the unseen, the ancestors, and the earth herself. And that even though there may be unique differences in terms of the way that we worship and the beautiful ceremonies and protocols that we each respectively observe from our traditions, that there's an underlying unity, that all people seek to have deeper communion with the source and the ancestors and the earth, whatever words are used to describe, this. And that as faith leaders, it's important that we not only teach peace, but that we walk peace, and that we can come together in solidarity to see the commonality of our human expressions, in the divine, as well as in the earth.
You came to my community in Pittsburgh in February, I think. It took us a while to schedule that, and folks are still talking about it. You preached in the morning and then shared a new moon ritual with about 25, 26 of us in our space. And I think you mentioned that your message that day was medicine for 2020. And do you remember some of the medicine that you mentioned that day?
I do, actually. I think I started my sharing by saying that the science that Al Gore was promoting, as well as the advocacy of Greta Thunberg, as in relationship to the earth changes that are taking place, right? The climate crisis that we're in was foreseen by the visionaries and the dreamers of different nations well before, right? That this time has been prophesized. And this also applies to this current pandemic as well. The medicine people and the seers and the dreamers of the world cautioned humanity about the unsustainability of the trajectory that we're on, and that there are consequences, repercussions to our actions. And we're seeing this playing itself out now.
Even repercussions for how closely we live with one another that makes us more susceptible to viruses.
Indeed. That's why I really currently in the language that's being shared, we're talking about social distancing. And I actually don't really prefer that word. I would prefer physical distancing, because there's this implication of isolation and alienation socially. And that's really not what we need. And so therefore, encouraging leaders from, from the faith community, as well as, the political arena, as well as business world, right, to ensure that we safeguard individuals, but not create islands of isolation right now, which can be, psychologically challenging and damaging as well. But more than just our own physical proximity, there's a deeper message here, which goes back to our love and respect of the earth and all relations upon it. I mean, there's currently shall we say, a blaming or a demonizing of bats, for example, and pangolins. They're trying to find the genesis of where this virus came from, and but these species are not to blame, right? We're the ones that are culpable, because we're extracting these mammals and all animals and plants from their natural environments,
We are
placing
taking
them.
over their places of living.
Sure. Well, not only encroachment, but we're actually trafficking them, right? So we're taking
Yeah.
them from wherever they're from, placing them in inhumane conditions, oftentimes species that don't have any interaction in the natural world with one another, placing them in close proximity, which allows for the transmission of contagions, right? And then, of course, there may be improper handling of these animals in terms of, not following any sort of hygiene protocols. So, of course, we're increasing the likelihood of contamination. And so that's really the etiology and the genesis of where these viruses are coming from, because of the illegal trafficking of wildlife, and placing them in wet markets or in inhumane conditions. So again, this, I've been sharing with my community and also in other, Zoom arenas, that this isn't a war with the virus. This
I
isn't,
agree with you on that.
there's
Yeah.
this also this talk about the equation between the towers, falling, and so a terrorist attack. But this is not a war. This is a wake-up call. This isn't terrorism. This is our teaching from the natural world, that we have to radically not only reevaluate, but we have to fundamentally change the way that we are engaging with the world and with each other. And my prayer is that once this subsides, and it will, as all viruses do, over time, as we learn the ways that we can, whether it be through plant medicines or through modern technology, find a way to live with these viruses, because we're not going to eliminate them.
Our
Prayerfully,
bodies are
we
made
will.
up of a lot of bacteria and viruses, and we wouldn't be who we were if it weren't for them helping us digest are the food that we eat.
Exactly. I mean, as it is, they say that about 20% of our human cells, the cells are human, 80% are part of a microbiome, right?
That's right.
And the earth also has her microbiome, which comprise the viruses and the bacteria, which have been here for literally billions of years. So they are technically our elders, and we actually need to listen to them right now so that we can learn how to be human and to remember, as I said in my prayer, remember our divine responsibility, which is to be stewards and protectors of this earth and all life upon this planet.
And
And we've
relations
forgotten
with
that.
the other animals rather than at the top of the food chain and not related.
Hmm. Sure. Well, we're the last to be created in all the origin stories of the world. So we're the youngest beings on the planet and therefore have the most to learn. So it's about being humble
Yeah.
and learning.
I think the other thing that this season of caring for COVID-19 is the way I've been trying to talk about it, has also exposed that the discrepancies and disparities in our own culture between people who live in less polluted places and more polluted places. And I think what we're seeing with the number of people that of color that are being taken by this virus points out that because poor people and people of color are often forced into places where there's more pollution, their own heart and lungs are more susceptible to the comorbidity of this virus because
Mm-hmm.
of the way that it attacks lungs and our other organs. And so we need to remember the people around Louisiana, and that this might be why there's more people in Chicago that don't have health care or can't afford health care in our culture
Mm-hmm.
are are more at risk of this because of the other corresponding levels of pollution and lack of health care in our own culture.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even within the state of California, the what has been done in terms of the numbers that have been collated, show a disproportionate percentage of people of color being adversely affected, and also in relationship to access to healthcare and resources. Right? On the reservations, for example, I've been speaking with some individuals, some obviously medicine people and chiefs on the reservations, and they're sharing the challenges that they face because many of them, there aren't any large hospitals on many of the reservations. Many of them are clinics, and so they have to travel into the large cities, which often can require time, and perhaps they don't even have some transport to get to the larger cities where the hospitals can effectively take care of them. So,
Especially the Navajo Nation that's so spread out.
exactly. Yeah. So, yeah, your point is extremely well stated, and of a just what I've been sharing is that these kind of crises tend to bring out the truth of who we are individually and collectively. And so,
And the number of people
prayerfully,
on the Navajo Nation who've been exposed to uranium because of the uranium mines there, it kind of points out that how that is putting them at risk because of our historic mining for that dangerous ore.
hmm and essentially the genocide of native peoples and the acquisition of land and the continual marginalization and suppression of indigenous and people of color.
Hmm.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So you're going to be leading a workshop, a retreat with us on July 26th. Our May 3rd retreat that Skylar Wilson and Jennifer Listig are going to be doing is going to be online because we're still going to be in a shelter-in-place time. But we hope that we'll be able to be at San Damiano for the retreat on July 26th that you'll be leading. That's a part of the 4 retreats this year on the spirituality of protecting and honoring Mother Earth. And we're looking forward to that very much. And
As am I.
and looking forward to your leadership in that, and not just the ritual but the teaching aspect. What are ways that interfaith leaders can come together in solidarity in this time?
Well, considering the shelter-in-place orders, I think the platform that we're using right now is obviously a viable avenue. Um, I think for me personally, religious and spiritual leaders must also just continue to inspire their own people, um, whether it be online or through small groups, to really deepen their own sacred practice right now. I know many of the chiefs and medicine people that I know, and myself included, um, we're doing our prayers and practices daily and encouraging all people, to fortify their spiritual way of life, and to fortify their spirits, because chances are, as time goes on, the the degrees of separation between ourselves and this virus will diminish. And so that's kind of the teaching, part of that prophecy that I spoke to is that individuals that have that connection to the earth and maintain their strength and their resiliency and fortitude spiritually, emotionally, psychologically, not getting riddled by fear, but by being, clear and proactive and nurturing and nourishing themselves, then they will have a greater opportunity to survive. I do believe, if we look historically, again, looking at the genocide of indigenous peoples, my family, my teachers always shared with me, that when infectious biological agents were deliberately introduced into native communities that didn't have immunity, that the medicine people would um, go to their ceremonies to help people, strengthen their immunity and maintain their resolve. And so, for myself, I'm continuing to offer ceremonies for those that are compelled to show up and participate. Again, being mindful and aware of physical distancing, and we've modified many of the ceremonies to ensure proper hygiene protocols and practices are implemented. And so that's what we can do. And also then, also once uh, the virus abates and we find ourselves venturing out into the world, I really think it's important for religious and spiritual leaders to come together to really unify the people, um, because I do believe that the isolation is weighing heavy on many individuals, and so um, you know we can come together to support one another and bring people together, so that we can heal and continue to do the work, because there are individuals that are going to pass away, and sometimes we can't necessarily have the large memorials or gatherings that that soul may have desired, or the family desires, because of restrictions. And so to support also individuals that are grieving or going through difficult times right now, to be there as best we can, and then perhaps dream ceremonies to help individuals. I know in the Lakota way there's what's called the wiping of the tears ceremonies, right, for the bereaved. And so to do wiping of the tears ceremonies, for example, in the many different faith traditions. I'm sure other traditions have their own way of memorials and bereavement. And so coming together to support individuals who are in pain or grieving the loss of loved ones, right? And then also to continue as spiritual leaders to champion the people, and to support them through this time right now. Really encouraging individuals to also think about the beings that are surviving, that have experienced the virus and are on the other end of it, right? So we're not just focusing on the morbidity and the mortality rates, but the survivor rates as well, because that's also building a momentum that can then be used to not only encourage us to move forward, but also, the serological samples that are needed to allow antibodies to be manufactured in
That's right.
support of the collective. So those are just a few of the suggestions that I have for us to come together, out of respect and collaboration of our faith traditions, because this is an opportunity for us to unify, right? And to really work together cooperatively. I mean, I see this as a species initiation. Just like all traditions, Christ went out into the desert, right? Buddha went under the tree. Muhammad, they went into the cave. And native cultures, we have what's called the Hamblecha, the vision quest, right? Now, even those involve fasting, and this isn't the case, but this is a forced um, sequestration. And so it's an opportunity for us to go within, to do some deep dreaming and reflection, to evaluate our lives and see where we're going, not only individually, but as communities and as a nation and as actually as a world, because this is
And some are
affecting
going
all
kicking and
people.
screaming. And others are viewing it as the opportunity, like you mentioned, to be able to go inward, to view it as a time of Sabbath, to view it as a time of rest and preparation for what we might need to do. And I think also as a time of discernment for what we want to include back into our lives.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Because I
absolutely.
think a lot of things in our culture are capricious and we kind of set false timetables for ourselves and push ourselves quite a bit. And I think a lot of that expectancy and pushing of timetables that really is as capricious as we can see now. We were all in that treadmill, and in some ways, our work was so competitive and not communally based and not healthy for us
Mm-hmm.
that it really pushed us to do more than we should have been doing as well.
Mm-hmm. I mean, in one sense, what's blown out of the water is this illusion of control, and as I said earlier, we're the grandchildren here. We have the most to learn, and our elders, in this case, the viruses and the bacteria, because we also have, it's kind of a brilliant strategy. So the virus is emerging when usually it's the time of the flu, which can be bacterial, but also allergies, right? So, there's all of these other masks as well that are this virus is navigating, to help all of us to, as you said, to slow down and to undermine this notion of competition and to move into much more cooperative, collaborative models of engagement, which is ultimately what, the word mitakwi oyasin in Lakota, when we conclude our prayers, is all my relations. So
Mm.
we're all family, and not just two-legged people, but literally the viruses, the bacteria, the earth herself, the elementals, the fire, the water, the air,
The
the
wildlife have
plant
been coming back
nations.
into urban areas.
Yeah. And that is such a beautiful reflection on how, when given the opportunity, the earth can replenish and regenerate herself so swiftly, you
It's
know.
been great seeing such blue skies. And as someone
Mm-hmm.
who has asthma, to be able to breathe freer over the last few weeks has been really a blessing for me too.
Mm-hmm. My prayer is that, when we do venture out again, that we won't return to what was, because that's just not sustainable, but that we'll use this gift that's been given to us. Um, and again, I'm not, and my heart goes out for all those who have made their journey as a result of their viral infection. But for those that are left to continue on, that we do so with greater love and kindness and peace and cooperation.
And maybe
So,
our employers will also allow for more working at home rather than clogging our freeways and
mhm.
clogging the BART system that tries to get everyone to work in Oakland or San Francisco and allows folks to be able to continue to work from home and connect in new ways as well.
Yeah, that's actually a beautiful gift, to say, because it actually, you know, individuals do wish to continue to work as a form of their worship as well. And so, whatever they're called to do, it's about finding creative solutions. And that's also what turbulent, challenging times can engender is flexibility, creativity, resiliency, and these are all possible when we're given the opportunity to learn and to grow this way. So it's potentially very fruitful on many, many levels, provided we just don't, out of fear, go backward, because this oftentimes fear is going to spread faster than the virus itself.
Yeah, and we've seen that even with the targeting of Asian Americans and a few other folks during this time
Hmm.
as well.
Yep, exactly. Well, that's the fear and the vilification of people, because we always want to try to blame or, the, try to find who is culpable. And again, collectively, we are all culpable for what's happening,
Yeah.
not just one group of people. So,
So whether it's Passover tonight or Holy Week starting tomorrow and New Moon starting a few days ago, and thank you for that ritual you led that I was able to be a part of the other day,
mhm.
or the Ramadan that's coming up soon. We have many ways to stay connected and to continue to go deeper. I mentioned in one of my worship services a few weeks ago that the longest journey in the world is from here to here, the 12 to 18 inches from head to heart. And
Indeed.
maybe it's this ability to have a little empty time will allow us to do that. And at the same time, recognizing that there are folks that are working really hard on our behalf, continuing to work in essential industries, continuing to work in groceries and emergency offices and the county health departments. And we lift up all of those folks as well. And especially lift up folks who have lost their jobs in this
Hmm.
time and people who have been living without shelter and still need all of the food and support and shelter that they need as well.
Hmm. Yes, I echo everyone that you just mentioned, and that's also important to keep in mind that there are people putting their life on the line to ensure not only the safety of those that are infirmed in the hospitals and different healthcare facilities, but also, to keep the networks socially, the infrastructure of our society in operation. And therefore, that's also a way to diminish our fear so that people are not hoarding, right, resources, but rather this is the time to share resources, and that's what, our indigenous ancestors did, all over the world, people that had that connection to the earth, when they lived in communities, they lived in uh, nation states and in tribal villages, they were sharing the resources together to ensure that no one went without, and that's important. And so, um, yeah, we remove this notion of this notion of impoverishment, which causes us to want to hoard and just kind of focus only in a more insular way within our
Or
own
the
immediate
notion of
families.
individuality or the
Yeah,
hyper individuality of our culture
yeah,
and how we
yeah.
belong to each other.
Right. Well, for me, that's individuality is an absolute illusion. It's really about interdependence rather than independence. So,
That's right.
yeah.
Phillip Scott with
Well,
Ancestral Voice Institute for Indigenous Lifeways. People can find you at ancestralvoice.org and look for our retreat on July 26th, where we'll have you in leadership, hopefully in person, where we can drum and pray and sweat together.
I look forward to that, Will. many blessings to you and your continued ministry. And yeah, thank you for us really exemplifying what that exchange and that interfaith is about here today. So thank you very much. It's really an honor to support you and serve you and share with you today.
It's our honor to have you as a faith leader and a friend. Thank you so much.
Likewise, have a beautiful day. My prayers are with you and your community at this time. Aho, Mitako Yasi.
Aho.